Hi, and welcome back to the Future of SaaS Festival. We hope you're enjoying the presentation so far. Just a quick reminder, if you're not already a member of our Slack community, follow the link at the top of the event website to network and join the discussion.
There we go. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be. Welcome to the Future of SaaS Festival. In this topic, we're going to be discussing scaling your SaaS financial operations, which is one of my favorite topics because so much goes into this. Again, my name's Ben Murray, the SaaS CFO, and I'd like to introduce our great panel today. And I'm going to go kind of in order here, clockwise, is how I see everyone here. But we'll start with David to intro.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Great to have you. I run the SaaS vertical at Sage Intacct. We're the world's largest provider of combined financial and subscription offerings. And when Ben asked me to do this, I just jumped on board. I've done a number of these before, and I've been part of earning the business of over 1,500 clients in my career, and you learn a lot of patterns around what success looks like, what people need in order to be successful, people, process, and technology. And I hope between the five of us, we're able to share some of that with you today. So, Sally Ann.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Sal. I'm head of finance for an edtech SaaS business that's based in London. I've been in this role for about 18 months now. And in the last 12 months, we've seen our MRR grow by 200%. We're a pre-profit, so we're continuously raising capital here at Century. And my experience kind of lends itself to business advisory and finance transformation across Australia, UK, and the US in the past. But my role here in London is quite unique. So I do everything that finance entails, but I also raise our capital. But I also have a fully outsourced team. So today I'm going to, share some insights about what that looks like and how we scale in that way. Ron, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Ron Gilboa. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the VP Finance of Perimeter 81. Which is the leading secure network as a service provider designed to simplify cloud and application access for the modern and distributed workforce, which we'll probably talk a little bit later. We're a SaaS company, hyper growth mode. I'm doing a lot of biz ops, finance, accounting, whatever is needed. Great to have to be here. Sal, you're next.
Awesome. Thank you, Ron. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sal Abdullah. I'm currently the Vice President of Finance at Quorum Analytics. It's a B2B SaaS company based out of Washington, D.C., serving the public affairs and government relations space. Been with the company for almost 4 years now. We are a hyper-growth company. We were able to build the company to 15 plus million in ARR and over 100 employees before ever taking on a single dollar of outside money. We've since become private equity backed. That's only helped to fuel our growth even further. Prior to Quorum, I did a couple of startups, but before that, I actually started off my career working in politics, worked on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and looking forward to this conversation. We have a great panel.
Thanks, Sal. Yeah, we've got a great panel, a lot of finance experience, and then also from the software side as well. So this should be interesting. So again, we're talking about scaling our SaaS financial operations, and that's a pretty broad subject. So I'd like to kick it off. Maybe Sal, if you want to kick it off here, what do you first think of, when you think about scaling your financial operations? Because it's a pretty big subject. Is there a framework or just initial thoughts that come to mind when you're thinking about that progression?
Absolutely. I think it's useful to start with defining what the term scale means. I've seen people make the mistake of confusing scale with grow. Growing is essentially a linear operation where you're adding headcount or the same amount of resources for the same amount of work. In order to truly be to fit the definition of scale, you should be getting more efficient with time. An example of this is accounts receivable. If I have one AR person handling 500 clients and I get to 1,000 clients and I have 2 AR people, I didn't really scale. I just added more headcount. And so when I think of scaling, I think of that, of like, how do I do my work more efficiently without just adding more headcount to the problem? And I think, in our day and age, the number one thing one can do to scale an operation efficiently is to have the right software and processes in place.
Absolutely. I love the comment that scaling doesn't just mean, linear addition of headcount, because even in the back office here in finance and accounting, we want to be efficient in our processes. Sally Ann, what are your thoughts on scaling? Because you have a little different perspective on how that could work within a finance and accounting department.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to build on what Sal briefly spoke about, it is about scaling rather than just growing. But when I think about it, I think about when you are required to scale, it means that your revenues are growing. And something that's really important to get right is your tech stack, in that to be able to integrate with operations and things like that across your business to ensure that you can calculate some of these SaaS metrics from the get-go, and you've always got that historical data. It's really important. It's a really important role that metrics play, improving story and driving strategy across, operations, but also capital raising and then exit strategies kind of at the end goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Tech, SaaS metrics, huge. Ron, any thoughts here on what comes to mind when scaling your teams or in the past experiences that you've had?
Yeah, so I think the most important is to work, in sync with the other departments, product and especially BizOps and sales. As you grow, you have more customers, more invoices. You need to have a very tight scaling operations, and BizOps and working in sync with other departments is a crucial part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I look at scaling financial operations, three things come to mind as my framework when I've built out departments. One, people, right? Hiring, training, and who are you hiring first? The second is process, right? Because in finance accounting, we're very transactional, whether we like it or not. So you have to have good old-fashioned process. And lastly, technology. And Sally Ann mentioned technology, which is huge now because the business models are changing with SaaS. No longer are we just recurring revenue. Pricing models are changing. We're getting more creative on how we go to market, and we've got to adapt now in finance and accounting, and technology is a big key to that piece. So I'll throw the tech question over to David, because he's got a lot of experience working with customers, prospects, and a lot of conversations. What's happening on the front lines, with SaaS teams? So David, what comes to mind? I mean, what's that tipping point? What do you hear from customers and prospects as far as when they're like, hey, I've got to do something different here?
Yeah, absolutely. And first off, something that's important to me for all of you listening, we want to know what's important to you, what questions you'd like. Ben's such a great moderator. He's got some questions, but let us know, because there's a tremendous amount of expertise here that's coming in. And I generally try to talk in terms of principles so that there's lessons learned for everybody. And I do have one question, though. Emma, City or United? By the way, on your chat. So, and by the way, get it right. There's only one right answer to that question. Principle number one is just understand what your customer's buyer's journey is and the problem they're trying to solve. And then you can figure out how to monetize that and what the cadence is going to be, and then what the right metrics are underneath all that. And second, depending what your billing model is, there's always a point where scale breaks down on either number of invoices you got to get out, or number of revenue schedules you got to get out, payables you got to get in, entities you got to consolidate. And my personal advice, having done this so many times, is doing it sooner rather than later. There's this magic tipping point where you understand what your business model and revenue model and renewal model is going to look like. And when you're getting close to figuring that out, then do it. Don't do it too soon, because then you codify the wrong processes. If you do it too late, then you're running too fast and everything's too scaled, and build sacred cows on how processes are going to work, but to Sal's earlier point, you're getting a growth model instead of a scale model. And I could go on and on, but I want to set up everybody. But that's the principle to think about. Know your buyer's journey, and then when you nail that, then scale the processes, because you'll hit your own tipping points.
Yeah, absolutely.
Team?
Yeah. And I'll throw this out to whoever would like to answer. It's like, let's make this actionable. Like, I have a process that I follow with my tech stack. So I'm curious, as you've worked in finance and accounting, guys, what is that journey for you? What types, and maybe not just not vendors, but what solutions do you follow in order, to implement in that tech stack so you can achieve efficiency, right? Because we all start with our core accounting system, the general ledger. And then from there, those pain points and like David said, our buyer's journey are the pain points, what are we trying to solve in that journey with technology? So I'll throw that out there of how you progress your tech stack to help you become efficient.
I can go.
Oh, go ahead, Ron.
Okay. So when I came to Perimeter, everything was outsourced, and we used a local software for ERP in Israel and another one in the US, different ones. So my top priority was to implement NetSuite. But before I could do that, I had to work a lot of weeks with our BizOps and our billing system, and make sure everything is in order, and I'm aware of all the different parameters we have before we can implement a real financial accounting system. And I think that knowing your business, knowing how a customer comes, and the whole loop of PO to cash and all of that, it's a very important topic to keep in mind before you start adding the financials.
Yep. Sal?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I would say begin with looking at the business model and where the complexity in the business is going to come from. I was the head of finance and administration of an oil and gas company about 7 years ago. We had one client, which was a national oil company, and we would send one invoice a month for like $4 million, $5 million, and that was it. So there's no complexity around revenue recognition. Where that business was extremely complex was on the expenditures. 300 employees, shift going in and out of the field, flying internationally, huge amounts of inventory and complexity and tracking of costs. And so the emphasis for us there was to really build out the costing system and everything related to expenditures. Now, fast forward a few years later, and I'm in a SaaS environment. Expenditures are pretty simple. I throw up Expensify and Bill.com, and that has me covered. Where the complexity in the business comes from is the order to cash process that Ron was talking about. And so the first thing that I did with Quorum, my current employer, is really shore up the order to cash process and work with sales operation to make sure I have a really robust set of tools and processes in place there. So it all goes back to your business model.
Yeah, absolutely. That business model, the pricing, how complex, not complex, how often you're invoicing really dictates that journey. And Sally Ann has, I think, also an interesting perspective with this insourced, outsourced, and how that technology comes to play. So Sally Ann, what are your thoughts on tech stack with your operating model within finance and accounting?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the whole team is outsourced. So it's really important that integrations work so that they have access to everything. What's really great is that the firm that is responsible for the outsourced team is heavily invested in innovation. And so I think what is really important is if you're going to go down that outsourced route is you find the perfect partner for your business and for your business complexities. And there will be, different firms that will be specialists in the industry that you're in. And I think that's really important to get right.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with a lot of SaaS founders, and a lot of times we have to switch out the outsourced accounting firm because they don't speak the language of SaaS, right? They don't understand revenue recognition in SaaS. So it's really key to partner with that firm that understands your business model, and then they have the right tech stack to support you. For me on my journey with tech, usually it's, hey, how's my accounting system? Is that good? Am I going the bolt-on route or am I going ERP? And for me, usually it's invoicing, solve the invoicing problem, make that efficient, and then next RevRec, right? So invoicing to RevRec, those kind of go hand in hand. And I always say you have to have bulletproof RevRec in a SaaS company. That's got to be so solid. And then maybe sales tax compliance, and then on and on. But like Sal said, it's like, what are those acute pain points in your processes that you're trying to solve? So really important. And then kind of taking a different angle here, Sally, with outsourced accounting, how does that work? If you can kind of explain maybe the SaaS founders out there who have a bookkeeper, how do you progress with that? Because I think, some are like, hey, I need to hire a staff accountant, which would be awesome, great, employing more people, but sometimes more efficient just outsourcing certain pieces. So how does that progression work, to outsource? And then when do you think about maybe then insourcing accounting?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first kind of got to that level where we definitely needed to either hire internally or do something externally, we kind of just made a long list of all of the different functions that a finance team could do. And we separated them into value added finance function and non-value added. And we found the perfect partner that could do the non-value added work that was transactional, repetitive, recurring, so that there was less errors or, less business messiness, let's call it, for them and complexity for them to deal with. Everything else is kind of handled internally, so any value added work, because it is the people on the ground that are communicating with all of the different parts of the business that you should have internally in your internal finance team. As you grow, you may think about bringing all of your outsourced team, in-house. And I think the first hire that I would kind of make is a business analyst. I would continue to build my value added team in-house rather than, bringing in some of that transactional work in-house. But I think what is really important to say, Ben, is that for most of the people that are probably listening today, is that business isn't always, this methodical process. And sometimes you start with a CRM and you've got so much data in that CRM, and then you need to start thinking about your tech stack and what that looks like. And it's not a linear process, right? It's not methodical. And sometimes you have to go through that messiness and the complexities of the business and try to tick things off as you go. You can't just kind of disregard everything that you've already got. And so what I would say to a lot of people on the call today is, when you're scaling your finance systems, don't get put off by having to slowly iterate the process. It's always going to be an iterative process.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I move on to David here, we do have a question from Sean, which is a great one. So he's asking, what are some of the biggest mistakes that startups make in setting up their financial operations? So let's learn from our mistakes that we've made. So I'll throw that to the group. So what comes to mind? Is it tech? Is it hiring? Is it process? What have you done where it's like, whoops, I would have done it a different way if I had a chance again?
Ben, I've never made a mistake, so I don't know how to answer this question.
This group, it's going to be silence here. So, yeah, Sal, what are you thinking?
So I definitely think, if you think about the key components of a great performing team, it's people, it's process. And I think for me, getting the people wrong has been the biggest mistakes in my career. It is really painful to not have the right people in the right seat. And I would say early on in my career, I was probably the wrong person in the wrong seat. So this is not me directing it towards other people. There's certain instances where, you're just not the right person for a particular industry or a particular job. And so getting that wrong in the beginning could be extremely painful. So taking the time to build the correct team And building the correct team is not just about like finding rock stars. It's about putting together an orchestra that works well together, and mixing people who maybe complement each other's weaknesses is really important. And I would say, if I were to look back over the course of my career, it's always been related to mistakes with hiring that have cost me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Hiring is key, I think, right? Finance accounting, you've got to be so detail-oriented, process-oriented, and if you're not that, that can be trouble. Any other thoughts on mistakes, or maybe David, from, prospects coming to you? It's like, hey, we tried this, didn't work. We're coming to you. Please help us.
Oh gosh, I'm back to, I want to make it simple tips for everybody. And if you've already gotten if you start with the business model and then work yourself into what the revenue to cash, stream's going to be, then you'll know what your processes are, and you can dictate what success looks like in the job, and then hire people. We're the best. Meg Whitman, former CEO of eBay, just said it: the best in the world hire right half the time. So I always say to somebody, can they do the job, and do they want to do the job? And I want to add one more thing from what you said, Sal. And to me, the biggest currency for success, I've done this so many times. I don't mean to say that I got it all figured out, but it's, does the executive team trust each other? Because the market's going to shift so much, and competitors are going to move so much, and product missteps are going to happen because you just don't know. And do you work together, or do you position against one another as you're going to work through that? And to me, it's like anything. It's very complex, but that's the biggest thing to work about. If you feel like you don't trust somebody on the team that's critical to your success, my advice is find a way to work that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts, guys, on mistakes or learning lessons from your career in finance?
I think my biggest thing is, not in this current role, but in previous roles, is businesses that build customized software for finance operations. I feel like that can be a really risky part of the finance function. David, I hope you're agreeing here.
I think he agrees.
I'm so agreeing.
Yeah.
Oh,
so, what can happen is, as you get, an off-the-shelf product that can be customized, you start customizing it, and then all of a sudden it needs an update. And then how do you support that? It's not a sustainable kind of option, really. And yeah, it costs a lot of money, and you either need to pay someone out and outsource that kind of update, or you have to have someone internally that's their current role. Finance is seen as such a overhead, and so it can be really, really difficult to try and get staffing budget for your finance team. So I would be really conscious of, any customized software. It comes back to that whole process. There's parts of your process that you'll be able to change to fit off-the-shelf software. I think the second thing is more related to reporting, and that is, hindsight's a beautiful thing. You wish you had historical data on key metrics that investors look at when you're raising funds, you're raising capital, or you're looking at a potential exit. And so my advice would be, don't think that you're too young in your business life cycle stage to start tracking and calculating these metrics. They will come in handy. In 12 months' time, 2 years' time. We're always looking back to see what we can learn from what we were, doing, at that product release phase of our life cycle, and things like that.
Yeah,
add one thing to that, and then transition over to Ron and Sal. My observation over time is the single greatest impact that finance makes in a company is informing better decision making. And so it's, what decisions does the company and the executive team need to make? And then how do you produce the data, both looking backwards and forwards, to inform that decision making?
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And just, I guess, one, before we move on, and we'll answer some of these questions as we go along, but learning lesson has always been in software implementation for me. Don't just go to a vendor and say, my invoicing is broken, or I don't have RevRec, or I don't have this, or it's just broken. Make sure you take the time to map out your use case, your processes. Where is that data coming from? Is it from your CRM system? Is it from your web application? Now there's so much data trapped within our businesses to be able to invoice. Now it's not just recurring, but transactional. We've got hardware, we've got consumption, that we map that out first. So we go to the vendor and we can present our use case to make sure we're married up, because we don't want to find out once we've started implementation that, oops, it doesn't do that, which is not a great feeling. So it's not just on the vendor, the software guy, or gal, to figure it out for you. You've got to figure out kind of what your solution should be and map that use case, and then find software solutions that will fit with that. So important to do your homework first, and then go to market and figure out, the good fit there. Because once you get something tuned up and running, it's such a good feeling and such an efficient process. So just my learning lesson there on the tech side. So we'll keep going with the questions on the side here, and we'll address them along the way. But kind of continuing on, Sal, you mentioned, scale is not just linear growth. And, in pre-discussions, you mentioned, your team sizes. So let's kind of focus on staffing here and team size, because that's always interesting, right? In finance, I always feel hesitant as the CFO. It's like, I'm holding others accountable to the budget. I've got to hold myself accountable. So I can't just go hire a bunch of financial analysts and staff accountants and controllers. But Sal, you had some interesting comments on this and the growth within your department, and what efficiency looks like. So maybe you could take a moment and discuss that.
Yeah, we're a very lean team. I think I was probably I'm trying to remember when I brought on my first person, but I'm pretty sure we grew to almost like 60, 70 headcount before I even had anyone on my team. Literally had software running things. And it was a mess in terms of just the amount of workload that one person should be handling. Things luckily have eased up. We're still very lean. Our company is probably around 180 people right now, and I have 2 people on my staff. I have an assistant controller, and I have a person doing AR and AP. I recently brought on an outsourced firm to help with collections, so they're purely focused on collections. And I'm hiring a financial analyst because we took on a private equity firm as an outside investor. The reporting requirements have shot through the roof. We brought them on, I believe it was July of last year, so almost a year now. And the reporting requirements on one person is a little too much. So we're going to have a team of 4 by the end of the year. And we'll probably be around 200, 220 in terms of headcount by the end of the year. So it gives you an idea of how small the finance team is.
Yeah, great efficiency there. Others on kind of how your teams have progressed, or thoughts on staffing and even first hires or anything in that area?
So I'm like Sal. I arrived at Perimeter a year ago, and we were 60 in 3 locations. And I started we had an external bookkeeping, but I've done everything myself. I like to get my hands dirty, knowing the material from bottom up, and then I added a bookkeeper. And just now, when we're nearing 150 employees, I'm taking another finance controller to help with the accounting stuff, and that's it. Yeah. No, I just want to mention again, the BizOps is the most important position as I see it, because again, it connects the sales to the finance, and this is very important.
Yeah, and Sally Ann, your thoughts. You have a little different model. What does your internal team look like versus, just I guess your internal team, because you have some functions outsourced, because it's a different paradigm where, hey, let's hire accounting and scale to financial analysis, all that stuff. But if we outsource accounting, maybe that first hire, right, like you said, is the business analyst or financial analyst. So more of that, I don't want to say accounting is not value add, because I love accounting, but how, tell me about your team, because you've got a different model.
Yeah, definitely. So as I've explained, all of that kind of day-to-day AP, AR, revenue recognition, management accounting is outsourced. And yeah, I would be looking at a business analyst or, someone that can help make better decisions in the business by taking all of these metrics and things like that and help the sales team, the marketing team, the events team, product drive better decisions in the business. As Sal kind of said, as you venture into that venture capitalist investment mix, you will be subject to more reporting requirements and things like that. And so it's really important that you have quite a experienced business analyst team that is ready for that kind of part or life cycle stage of the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then we'll kind of wrap up this piece. But David, I'm curious, what kind of personas come to you, with Sage, and when they're trying to improve their financial operations with technology, who is that? Is it a CFO? Is it a founder? Is it, an accountant, a controller? Like who's coming to you? Who the light bulb is switched, and they're like, oh boy, I need to make some changes here.
It's like Ron said, biz ops.
Mm-hmm.
They're the progressives driving change and insights in the business. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and like I hope I pronounce your name correctly. Is it Jide? I hope Jide. If I got that, I'm terribly sorry if I didn't. I got a Michigan accent. And like I want to go back to the central theme, right? Because we'll keep repeating it. What decisions do you need to make? And then that's the person that you want to empower to drive the systems change. Because as you go through each stage of growth in the company, the decisions you need to make evolve. And the
Mm-hmm.
questions that you get asked by whoever it is, because oftentimes there's outside investors, they're going to drive what it is. And then the role of the CEO and the CFO, I always think, is to define success and to inspire hope. So doing both
Yep.
of those and putting the stack in place in order to make that successful is helpful. There's a little bit of background. I don't know if you hear that, Ben. But
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get that fixed. Let's see. And then, kind of pivoting here, and going, and I'm sorry too pronouncing the first name today, but how, CFO of a SaaS company, what will be the suggested structure for an optimal finance function? And this is where I want to take the conversation next. And it's a little bit harder, is in finance, what do we think our strategic value add is, right? What are we trying to provide to the executive team, to the board, to the to our owners, to not prove our worth, but what's our role here in shaping the company, influencing where do we add value? So I'll open that up, because we do a lot of transactional stuff, reporting, compliance, taxes, excuse me, but then at the end of the day, we want to contribute to the health and growth of our company. So I'll throw that out there, and what your thoughts on, to the finance and accounting crowd in the audience, the CFOs, where are we providing value?
Yeah, Ben, I think in terms of view of the business, the finance function is unique in the place that it sits, and that it has purview over what so many other people are doing at the company. Oftentimes, the CFO has the greatest understanding of the business model at the company, maybe right next to the CEO. And so, by positioning oneself at the center of everything that's going on, you by default become a very powerful business intelligence function, right? Very few people, marketing is concerned with marketing, sales is concerned with sales. Same thing with product, and this is not deprecating anything that they're doing. It's just very few of them have time to be looking at the business holistically, whereas by default, the finance team is really not internally looking. If they're doing a good job, they're not supposed to be internally looking. They're looking at all the other aspects of the business. And so I think that lends itself well to helping set the goals of the company and defining what those goals are and moving the company towards that direction, helping the CEO come up with a strategic narrative during the strategic planning process. So there's a lot that we can do that is really more artistic than purely just number crunching. And I think it's really important to lean in on those things.
Yeah, great points. Any thoughts on where that strategic value add is in the finance function?
I can relate to what Sal said. Finance, a good CFO, good VP of finance can see the holistic pictures of the company. And I'll give an example. When I came, there was a specific commission plan, commission. But it wasn't directly connected to the company's KPI. For example, we wanted to bring more annual subscription than monthly. So I worked with the CEO and the VP sales, to align the commission plan to the company's KPI. This is something that you need the look from the outside, and sometimes the finance is the one that's seeing the whole pictures. So, Sal, you're spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. And any other thoughts there before we move subjects here?
I'll add one thing. A great executive team is there's always often an inside-outside relationship. CEOs often the outside voice to the market, understanding the market. Then the CFO, great term I heard, is the business model architect. So it's the same theme we're talking about, like what the finance tech stack is and what your trigger to do it is. What decisions do you need to make as the business model architect to guide how you're going to prosecute getting the great product that you got out to the marketplace so you get adoption as fast as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, today's CFO in a SaaS company, right, you've got to be so operational. You really have to understand the business operations. And I always say you really can't project the future, be proactive unless you understand the past, right? Starts with a strong accounting foundation. You have to understand your current financial profile to understand where you're going with the business. So operational, supporting those department executives is just key for the modern CFO today, not just debits and credits anymore, just way beyond that now. So maybe one last subject here, and it's come up a bit, Salian mentioned, metrics, reporting for exit or funding. Sal mentioned reporting requirements for PE, which ramps up when you're in the PE world, right? It doubles almost, you could say. So maybe start with Salian. It's always interesting, like what reports, metrics are you putting in place, internally, maybe also to satisfy exit funding investors? It'd be really interesting to hear, like, hey, what are you tracking? What's important to you on the metrics reporting side? Ooh.
I think Salian's mute button got gummed up a little bit. Gemma, if you can, you're still there. There you go.
There we go.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I've lost my mute button. So I think it comes back to what David was saying before, and it's what will help drive decisions. And, the things that we look really closely at is our recurring revenues, because they help with business sustainability and stability. When you're thinking about exits and things like that, high valuations come from business visibility and recurring sources and that predictability. So things that kind of feed into that MRR are things like your average price, and, making sure that is optimal for your business. The sales cycle, the conversion rates from a demo to a subscription. We look at customer lifetime value and retention rates really closely. And obviously because they're linked and linked to average price as well. And it's all these kind of metrics that our potential investors are looking at, when they're looking to invest, but then also after they invest, to ensure that the business is in a financially healthy state. It's all about that predictability and that visibility. And, you know, that will help you reach your next funding round. It'll also help you with those higher valuations, you know, on those exits.
Yeah, great points. That's one thing. Valuations come with better financial transparency. If there's no transparency in the business, it's really understand the operations, the value, where's the value creation in the business. So great point. Ron, Sal, other thoughts? Sal, I know you mentioned a lot of reporting requirements, guys. Any thoughts on metrics that you're tracking, key reports that you've put in place to help you and your business?
Sally Ann hit on a bunch of the metrics that the private equity firm likes to see on a monthly basis. So obviously you have your core financial statements, your SaaS P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, pretty standard stuff. And then they look for AR bridges, cohort reports, a lot of things related to sales and the unit economics related to sales, so CAC payback periods, CLTV. At the highest level, what distinguishes, I think, private equity firms from, let's say, like other business models, like venture capital firms, is private equity firms care about cash flow and care about efficient growth. It's just a different type of investment. And so I would say the highest metric, or North Star, is probably the rule of 40, tracking to the rule of 40. And that's kind of what we use to understand whether we're growing in an efficient way. The other metrics are pretty much Sally Ann hit most of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Ron, or David, any thoughts? I know David would have thoughts on reporting, because I know as you guys build out your reporting to satisfy analysis, etc. But guys, any last thoughts on reporting and metrics?
Ron, please, and I'll add on top.
I just want to tell the crowd, we keep saying CAC and LTV and MRR. I just want to say to the crowd, don't be afraid of SaaS. You can go on Ben's blog and learn it quickly. So it's not rocket science. However, you need to make sure that, the way you calculate your metrics are correct, in line with what your boards and investors are expecting. So, don't be afraid, but make sure you have the right formula and that you know it by heart. And then you can go and see how it affects and how you can improve all of these metrics. So,
thanks, Ron. I'll build on that. This is just one example of so many great SaaS communities. Or if you're not part of a Slack group of peers, join one and reach out to any of us to get connected with that and to know what that is. Because there's great places you can get some assistance to go through all making all these decisions. And then, because you always want to look competent in front of your board. You don't want to say to your board, I don't know exactly what you want, but you can be clear. Tell me what you want, and then go work with your peer community in order to do it. I put a couple of videos on the side for everybody that actually one that Ben helped me build about number one, what's the ideal finance tech stack and how to think about it based upon the stage of company that you're at. And then the second one from a gentleman named Jeff Epstein, who was the former CFO of Oracle and now the finance operating partner at Bessemer Venture Partners, arguably one of the best venture capital firms in the world. And he was on our board, and he worked quite a bit with me on building our product roadmap based upon where he and Bessemer think the puck is going, how to create a great SaaS company. So there's two insights, and then Ben put his link in there. If you're not one of the 37,000 people who subscribe to Ben's newsletter, join so you can get to 38,000, because it's fantastic insights on metrics and the SaaS Academy and SaaS in 60 and so many other things.
Yep, thanks, David. So yeah, great points there. And I think now, I could talk for hours on finance and accounting operations, everything that goes in there, because it's so important, and it's so rewarding once you get to those certain points. And just one thought, is things, as you're scaling your financial operations, right, things plateau, right? We're always trying to move forward, but there come points where it's like I've plateaued. I feel like I'm not improving my finance and accounting function. But that is natural, right? You make some big improvements, you kind of plateau, and you think, hey, what's my next challenge, that I need to solve in finance and accounting? Because your business is scaling and challenges become different, problems become different. So it's natural. So don't feel, and it's a journey, right? This does not happen overnight. This is a journey, right? It could be a year journey, 2 years journey. You get to a point and another journey after that. So just keep that in mind, that it does take time. And like David said, learn from your colleagues. What are they doing? What have they implemented? What has worked? Because that path has been forged, by others. So take advantage of that, from your peers. So we'll open it up now to FAQs. Please chat any questions, and I'll look back and see if there are some questions that we could take on here that we didn't address.
We got Jade right. Jade.
Oh, good. Perfect.
I'm so happy. And Emma, you never answered on City versus United. So I'm going to take that to mean you're a City fan. So.
Yeah. So please chat questions. Anything we'll take on here. One thing that'd be interesting. Jade said, what's the suggested structure for an optimal finance function, right? And that depends on the stage of business that you're in. Typically, like when I've had finance and accounting function, if you've had a CFO in place, maybe you have a manager of accounting, controller, an AP, AR clerk, and then a financial analyst. Usually those are kind of those key positions that you fill out initially. And then from there, it kind of grows, from there. So curious, makeup of your teams, guys, what composition have you seen as far as those actual functional positions?
Yeah, Ben, I think it depends a lot what the strength of the CFO or VP of finance is as well. An example of this is I'm not a CPA. My training wasn't in accounting. And so for me, what I would want is a strong controller as probably one of the first positions to fill. And then people to handle the transactional volume. So you hit it with AR, AP, and then a financial analyst, and the rest is just filling out based on volume. So once the controller gets to a certain level where it's counterproductive for them to be doing everything themselves, you fill out a role beneath them, like an accounting manager or senior accountant, and so on and so forth. Once you get to a certain level of transaction volume, you may need to start putting in AR managers with AR billing specialists underneath them. And so it really is just about building out where you see the transaction volume is. It's good to have a heuristic to understand where you need people. So identifying early on, like the trigger for an additional AR person will be this number of invoices issued in a month, right? Or if you're noticing your DSO days falling behind because you don't have enough people doing collections, that might be another indication that you need to fill out people there. So coming up with like metrics, and the metrics are not just meant to be written in stone. I think a good manager subsidizes the metrics with just conversations with team members. Talk to the AR person. What's your workload like? Do you feel like you're giving customers enough attention? And just going from there. I think it's, as Celian said, like it's really like a process of iteration and getting feedback and going back and forth.
Absolutely.
I agree.
I think it also depends on where the complexity is in your business, right? And that will change. I'm sure that Sal and I have different complexities, and therefore we would look to hire in different roles, and that's going to be, the same issue across every business. So it's about understanding where the gaps are and where the most value lies for your business overall.
Yep, absolutely. And then we had another question come in, and this is a great question on the talent side. So Jackie asks, what's the most valuable trait you found when you're looking to make a finance hire in high growth businesses? And I'll take that one because something comes to mind right away, when hiring, because in smaller companies, as you scale, everyone has to contribute. So it's so cliched, but you've got to be a self-starter. You have to have that initiative to tackle problems, figure things out. So that's one of the biggest things that I look at in finance is, that self-starter initiative to take it on, own it, have that accountability, because right, working with smaller teams, everyone's got to, contribute, and it's hard, when you don't have that great teamwork. Any other thoughts there on traits?
I was just going to say someone that has an interest in understanding the operations of the business, because finance really needs to integrate with the operations of the business and to understand what drives those operations, and become kind of entwined in all of these teams. One, it will help make better decisions and bring to light some really interesting information for these business operations, but also business operations feed into the financial processes. So if you don't link the two, you're going to end up with a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Great point. Ops is key.
I was going to say on this level and this level is high emotional IQ, because we're back to so much trust and so much change. And if somebody gets defensive or process gets threatened, then they feel like a process owner. You just can't. There's like that Game of Thrones stuff just doesn't cut it early on. Maybe doesn't cut it ever, but it certainly doesn't cut it overall. And then second, with just the same constant theme, I hope all of you in the audience have heard from us. Know your business model, know where you're generating revenue, then know what your value added processes are, and then hire people who can help execute and evolve those processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nicole asked again, so we've got to address this. So she said, looking back on the time when your team had 10 to 15 members, I assume, total employee size, how would you have ideally built your team, with which positions of people, which is really interesting. So it's like kind of starting from the beginning. Maybe you're the first finance hire, so how would you build that out? And maybe start with Sally Ann, because you've got definitely a different perspective of like how that kind of should work initially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would start with quite a senior hire. I would start with someone that was at least a financial controller. And I think when you have just launched your product, you may not have that high transactional volume. You want someone that isn't too senior, that's been removed from transactional day-to-day finance operations. You still want someone that's happy to get their hands dirty, but they still have really good experience in building internal controls and finance controls that you need. And then you can start to look at, okay, is it more viable to go down that outsource route, or is it actually more viable to go, through internal hires? That's how I would start.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to chime in and say, first of all, I'm not sure it's numbers, how many members you need. It's more of your needs and what you actually need. If you need 2 AR, recruit 2 AR specialists if your collection is low. But it's more, see what the value added, projects you have, and end of month close, and see that you have your timetables correctly, and then see where you can improve it, and then recruit accordingly. So I wouldn't say, I need 15 people, just see your needs and then recruit accordingly.
Yeah, great points. And then Sean had a question here, which is a great one. So if we could all go back to the beginning of our careers in SaaS financial operations, what advice would you give your younger selves?
Go to more happy hours and don't work so hard.
I love that one.
I'll take this one, Ben, just because I have a lot of regrets from my early days in my career. I would say number one is don't try to reinvent the wheel. I used to believe that somehow if I came up with a process myself and a system myself, the world gave me extra credit, and that's not true. If you can steal a template, if you can take something off of someone's hand and implement it, make it, make yourself just go with it and make your life a lot easier. The second piece of advice that I would that I would focus on is just getting hiring right. Really did not like. I would say early on in my career, I used to value technical competence above all else. Like I used to value intelligence, technical competence, and I thought those two things would get you far in life. And I've come to realize that it's like playing baseball by yourself. Like you throw the ball, then you go chase after it, you pick it up, and you throw it again, and it's really exhausting. And having a great team where you can toss the ball back and forth, and someone actually catches the ball and is competent and throws it right back at you makes your life a lot easier. And I'm sorry, I know a lot of the audience is from the UK, so I apologize for using a baseball analogy rather than something like cricket or football, but it's my favorite sport.
Nationals are giving you something to cheer about too.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on advice for our younger self before we wrap up here?
I kind of just agree with Sal. Work smarter, not harder. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And Ron said it before, you don't need to be, a SaaS expert. There are so many great resources out there. So just continue to learn, continue to do the research, and someone's probably already thought about it, to be honest. So.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a big thing. Don't start from scratch. And I was actually a mainframe programmer briefly, and I was paired up with these very experienced programmers. And this is back in the day when you had those hard diskettes, and they carried it from job to job. They never started from scratch, right? They didn't just, hey, line one of code, and we're starting to code away. There's tons of templates, free templates on my site, so take those, take others, adapt them to your model, and it just saves a bunch of time. And that's where you learn best practices from others as well.
And
so, Sally-Ann.
Also know where your strengths lie. I think finance is kind of, everyone thinks it's such a broad thing, but actually there's quite a lot of niches in there. And just know where your value lies and find experts that can bridge your knowledge gaps or bridge your expertise gaps. And it comes down to that work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Sally, great point. It's like, hey, if accounting's not my forte, hire an experienced controller. If I came up through the accounting ranks, but I'm not really great with modeling, hire that FP&A hire who's super experienced to help you out. So that's a great point, because it is hard to be an expert in all areas within finance and accounting, because the breadth of our scope has just increased so much. So right, great points there. So we're pretty much out of time. We could go on for a couple more hours. But I'd like to wrap up with just, we have our LinkedIn profiles here, so please take a moment to connect with us. Love to hear from you. Please connect, message us. And guys, any other thoughts or ways, that people can connect with you if they have additional questions?
Well, I'd love connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy I could see who the attendees are. Many of you are customers. Thank you so much. And then I'd love if anybody wants to, as these waning moments, as Sal and Ron and Sally-Ann say something, did we answer your questions? Did you get value from the session? Because we wanted to pay it forward to all of you. I'm just wondering, I'd love some feedback and if we did that or not. So over to the rest of the team.
All right, well, we'll watch those comments. Yeah, guys, any last thoughts or way to connect with you? We're good?
Just via LinkedIn, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Feel free to shoot me a message on LinkedIn if I can be of any assistance. Happy to help as always.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Ben, David, Sally-Ann, Sal, Ron, thank you so much. It was a really helpful session. And hopefully we'll see you all again soon.
Sounds
Pleasure.
good. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.